Ever since I started filmmaking, I always had somewhat of a love-hate relationship when it came to gimbals. And ever since, I was looking for the perfect gimbal. And trust me, I've tried a lot of them. Crane 2S, the Xeon Crane 3S, bought the Weebill Lab, Payload AK 4500, Xeon Crane 2,
Crane 3.
So after using the DJI RS2 for a couple of weeks for commercials, music videos, and Bell even took it skating on the ice with the Canon C300 as well as the EOS R5, I got a pretty good feel for what this gimbal can do and how close it actually gets to being the perfect gimbal. So in this video I will talk you through my favorite kind of things that a gimbal must include to be considered a perfect gimbal, but more on that after the intro. So this is only going to be part one of a two-part review because there's a lot of stuff that I ordered online from Tilta as well as from SmallRig, but it's just not here yet. So in part one, I will focus on the gimbal as is, and then later in part two, I will also focus on all the accessories that I got with it and how they might have improved shooting with the gimbal when it comes to the C300 Mark III especially. So make sure to subscribe to this channel right now and enable notification to not miss that part 2 review when it comes out. So before I start talking about the DJI RS2, I will walk you through my checklist of a perfect Polly Pocket rainbow farting unicorn gimbal that I would look for when having wet dreams. So here's my checklist. Obviously, way up top on that list, it needs to be smooth. Duh. Right after that, it needs to be really lightweight, because the greatest gimbal doesn't really do much to me if I can't really handle it with a bigger cinema camera, and if I have to strap on an entire easy rig kind of setup just to shoot with it for a couple of minutes, then that kind of gimbal is pretty useless to me. So lightweight is pretty important for me as well. Also really high up on that list is portability and quick and easy setup, because I like attaching my gimbal to my backpack or even fitting it into my backpack and not having to lug around a huge suitcase that I could actually walk around with a dead body in it. So when it comes to this easy setup, I also like to quickly change locations, also go from handheld to gimbal to tripod in a matter of minutes or even seconds, and I really don't want to spend a lot of time having to rebalance everything, set it up, you know the deal. One thing that's pretty high on that list is that the gimbal should be able to fly my Canon C300 Mark III with an external monitor and the cable not being obstructed by some kind of rear axis. So in my perfect world, this gimbal would also come with a ring setup that I can actually control the gimbal with and can mount a lot of accessories to, like a microphone, a monitor, or wireless follow focus systems if I wanted to. But again, I don't want it to be too heavy and I don't want it to weigh too much either. So after we checked all of these boxes, it would also be pretty cool to have some really fancy features that I would probably never use anyway, but just knowing that they're there. So now that we have established that list, let's actually see how many of these boxes the DJI RS2 actually ticks off. So let's start with the design. And when I first unboxed the DJI RS2, I was really surprised because it is really small and it's incredibly lightweight. It also has a really smart design where you can detach the battery grip so you can fit it in a small bag. As a matter of fact, the entire gimbal fits in a bag this small, and that is just incredible because this gimbal bag for a gimbal that could potentially be used with a Canon C300 Mark III so far is unheard of, and that is just amazing. Another thing we can definitely check off that list is lightweight, because that thing isn't only tiny, but it's also really light. I can literally lift it up with only 2 fingers. As a matter of fact, Belle was using this to film her friend on the ice with the Canon C300 Mark III, and she was also filming with the Crane 3S in the past, and that setup was way too heavy for her. But with the RS2 and the Canon C300 Mark III, she had no problems for filming for 10-15 minutes at a time. that entire setup is so light. But it's not only that it is so light, but it's also really compact. Compared to the Crane 3S with the extension arm, everything is really front heavy and the center of gravity really isn't well balanced. So that makes the whole setup just so much heavier. But with this, it's so small and compact that you can actually use it for extended periods of time. So one thing that I really appreciate about the RS2. So overall, this gimbal looks good, it also feels really good, it also has all lockable axes, so smart design, and it really looks good and feels good in your hand. It does have some minor design flaws though. So one thing I don't like about the gimbal is the missing mounting points. You do have some really small tiny screws on either side, but you can't really mount a monitor to it or a microphone unless you buy additional equipment from DJI, because the mounting options are somewhat proprietary. I think you can use small rigs, NATO rail system, but overall it's not really that satisfying. And when Belle was using the gimbal shooting on the ice, that was her biggest problem, because she didn't really have any good mounting options for the external monitor, and that made the whole setup really awkward and really hard to shoot with. So she actually ditched the C300 mid-shoot and swapped it out for the EOS R5 and shooting just with the internal monitor. After she complained to me about this, I actually found a workaround. So when attaching the rear handle so you can go into underslung mode, you can actually attach a cold shoe on top of it, and I use one from SmallRig, and then add a monitor mount to it, also one I use from SmallRig, and then you can easily use your external monitor and put it into the center of the camera. It's still really far from the camera, so it's not 100% ideal, but it is the best setup that I have seen that works somewhat out of the box right now. So one more thing I really don't like about the gimbal's design is the base plate. In theory, it's kind of cool having this quick release plate that you can just slide off without having to rebalance the gimbal and just slide your camera back on again when needing to change batteries or when wanting to shoot handheld or on a tripod. For bigger cameras, this definitely is an absolute no-go, and that is for basically 3 reasons. Number 1, now the camera sits a little bit higher, and a cinema camera being really long, you really have all your weight just dangling in mid-air, and whenever you walk, you introduce a lot of shudder, and every time I was walking with the camera, you could actually see every step when walking. And I was using this camera for shooting a music video, and when looking at the footage afterwards, you could literally see every step in the footage. And that is also due to the fact that the plate isn't long enough, because it does come with a lens holder, but unfortunately I can't attach it when using the Canon C300 Mark III because it's just not long enough and there's no room for the lens mount to actually attach anywhere. Another thing that I really don't like about the base plate is that it's not compatible with my Manfrotto 501 tripod head. It is compatible with some Manfrotto heads and mainly all of those that slide in from the side, but the ones that you slide in from the back, the teeth are in the way, and that is really unfortunate because now I have to use some kind of quick release plate, and I will be looking into that, and this will be part of part 2 of this review. But as of right now, I have to actually change plates when I want to go from the gimbal to my tripod, and that is something that is really annoying. As I've already mentioned in the beginning, I ordered some parts, and there is a SmallRig plate that is supposed to be longer and to be used with the Canon C300 Mark III on the RS2, and I'm really looking forward to it because I think I can eliminate all these shakes with it and maybe also use a lens holder. So again, this will be part of part 2 of this review. So furthermore, it does have an LCD screen, and that is so satisfying to use, especially because it's touchscreen. So I can quickly go in the menu, I can auto calibrate, but I will talk about this later. So overall, I really do like the compact design, the look, and everything that comes with it, except for these minor flaws, but they could actually all be fixed with third-party accessories that I will talk about in another review. All right, now let's talk about Payload. First off, I had absolutely no problems of balancing the EOS R5 with a 28-70 on it, and it took it like a champ. Belle was filming with it on the ice, I was filming with it on the ground, absolutely no problem, super smooth footage. But then when attaching the C300 Mark III, it was somewhat of a different story. It did work very well with the 24mm 1.4, and when shooting with the Canon C300, obviously you need a monitor. So when using an external monitor with either HDMI or SDI, there isn't really enough headspace on the back of the gimbal for that to accommodate if you use a bigger lens like the Sigma 18-35 or the Canon 16-35. When using a smaller lens like the 24mm 1.4, we had absolutely no issues. You could go into underslung and there was nothing interrupting anything. But when using a bigger lens, it's also not that bad. It does fit on there, it actually balances perfectly, but you can't go completely into underslung. And that really isn't the problem if you use a ring setup, for example, because you definitely have enough headspace to walk around and move around, but you can't go into underslung. But with a ring setup, you can't and don't really want to go into underslung mode anyway. So for me, this isn't really a problem because, as I've already mentioned, I really prefer having a ring setup. For Belle, who shoots on the ice, who likes to have it simple and also likes to go into underslung a lot, she can't use the C300 Mark III with the RS2 with a heavier lens like the 18-35 or the 16-35, or probably not a 24-70 either. So that is something you have to keep in mind if you do want to run a bigger setup like a cinema camera with a bigger wide angle lens. So when it came to the workload, the RS2 seemed to have absolutely no problems of running as well as balancing the C300 Mark III with the 18-35. As a matter of fact, you have an integrated auto calibration as well as balancing test tool right within the gimbal. And when I ran both, it worked flawlessly, and it even showed me that all of my axes were balanced excellently. So let's talk about the ring that I mentioned, and the one from Tilta that is actually made for this gimbal obviously hasn't arrived yet, but I did use a generic one that I got from Digital Photo, and this is designed with the Crane 3S in mind, but it also works with any other gimbal, and that is what I used on 2 shoots already because I could easily attach all of my accessories to it, like a microphone or a external monitor, and that worked very well. Except for the minor flaw that with this general gimbal, you don't really have a mounting point that really fits the gimbal. You only have a 1/4" screw, and that works fine, but it does get loose over time when you really walk around with the gimbal a lot and you do a lot of movement with it. Plus, this entire setup is just way too big for this tiny gimbal, and I really do like the design that Tilta came up with, where you can detach the battery grip and put it on top of the ring just to power your gimbal and also have an extension ring. So that makes the whole setup even more compact, and that actually looked like a near perfect solution to me. So I ordered it online and I'm just anxiously waiting for it to arrive soon. Plus, in theory, with the Tilta ring, you can also change the settings of your gimbal, and with the one that I had, I couldn't. I briefly mentioned it earlier, but now I want to take a little bit more time and talk about all the smart functions of the gimbal. And you can connect it to your phone and use an app to control your gimbal, and that worked really well. You also have an auto calibration tool within the gimbal or within the app, and that worked very well. So once you have your gimbal set up and everything is balanced, you just run the auto calibration tool and it sets all your motor strength accordingly to your setup. So after you've done all that, you can also run a test that lets you see how well your entire rig is balanced and set up. And you just click on it, and then you have to tilt your gimbal between 15 and 45 degrees. And the really cool thing is that within the app, it actually shows you how much degree angle you currently have. So you can't really make any mistakes. And afterwards, it either tells you that some of your axes aren't really perfectly balanced, or it shows you that everything is fine, so you don't have to worry about yourself making a mistake in the whole balancing progress. So that is one thing that I really did like, and I wish all of the other gimbals had that too. So overall, I really enjoyed shooting with the DJI RS2. It's small, it's lightweight, it has a lot of cool smart functions, and in theory, it also works really well with my C300 Mark III. I'm currently not using it anymore with the C300 until I get that new base plate, but I also shot a commercial on the EOS R5 with it the other day. And here I got some really amazing smooth footage out of it. I also used it with my big ring, I had a handy recorder attached as well as a shotgun microphone and an external monitor, and still the overall setup was light enough for me not having to work with a big easy rig, and I was really flexible to just maneuver my way around this entire shoot. And if you want to see a full behind the scenes on that, I will be doing one in the very near future, so make sure to subscribe as well as hit the notification bell. The only thing I regret about the purchase of the DJI RS2 is that I didn't go for the combo version. I don't really need the follow focus because when shooting on a gimbal I use autofocus about 95% of the times, and the way I understood it in the beginning is that the image transmitter unit is only there to transmit your image to your phone so you can use it as an external monitor, and I didn't know that the auto track function only works with that unit as well. So for part 2 of this review I will try to get my hands on the combo version so that I can test all these amazing features out as well. So there you have it. This was my initial review of the DJI RS2, and as you can tell, I really do like this gimbal, and this will be my main gimbal for all of my shoots from now on, and I can't wait to get all these accessories. And if you want to know how well all these accessories work before I upload the full review, make also sure to follow me on Instagram, because I usually give constant updates about new tools and gear on there in my Instagram stories, so make sure to be following me on there as well. And overall, I hope you liked this video, and if you actually did, actually give it a like. Also subscribe, hit the notification bell, and I hope to see you on the next one. Bop, bop, de boo, bop, bop, de bop, de boo.